When the mansion's silence hides ancient secrets, a voiceless pregnant young woman finds herself in a struggle against forces far beyond her imagination. A wild horse will be the key to unlock it all. The gentle sea breeze caressed Jessica Adams' face as she walked along the cobblestone streets of Port Haven. Her steps were careful, one hand always resting on her 5-month pregnant belly, as if protecting the small being growing inside her. The morning sky displayed a deep blue, typical of the coastal region she called home. Jessica felt a vibration in the ground. The bus was approaching. Her eyes, always alert, captured every detail around her. This was how she navigated the world in perpetual silence since birth. The 25-year-old adjusted the bag on her shoulder and took a deep breath, preparing for another day of work at the Mason mansion. As she disembarked at the stop near the road leading to the property, she spotted the imposing building atop the cliff. The Mason mansion was like a modern castle, its commanding lines contrasting with the blue of the sea. For many, that place represented power and wealth. For Jessica, it was simply the place that guaranteed her livelihood and her child's future. "Good morning, Jessica," signed Martha, the housekeeper, when the young woman crossed the property gates. The grey-haired lady was one of the few people who made an effort to communicate with her in sign language. Jessica smiled and responded with quick gestures, asking about the day's tasks. "Mr. Edward asked for the library to be organized today, and he also wants you to clean the main office," explained Martha, with slightly awkward but understandable movements. As she walked along the marble corridors toward the library, Jessica noticed unusual activity. Employees exchanged worried glances and conversed in small groups that quickly dispersed when a family member approached. Something was different that morning. In the library, she began her work meticulously, organizing books and dusting the solid wood shelves. That's when she felt a presence. Turning quickly, she saw Luke Mason standing at the door, watching her intensely. "Sorry if I startled you," he spoke, momentarily forgetting she couldn't hear him. Realizing his mistake, he pointed to a notepad nearby. Jessica picked up the pad and handed it to him with a pen. Luke wrote, "My father is acting strange. Have you noticed anything?" The question caught her by surprise. Why would the boss's son be asking this of her, a simple employee? Jessica shook her head negatively, but her gaze revealed that she, too, had noticed the changes in Edward Mason's behavior. Luke wrote again, "Be careful what you see and hear in this house." Before she could fully process the warning, the sound of hooves caught her attention. Through the library window, Jessica glimpsed a black horse galloping through the garden, a majestic animal with shiny coat that gleamed under the sun. It wasn't common to see horses on that property, and something about that animal seemed almost supernatural. When she turned her gaze back to Luke, he had already left. The notepad remained on the table, with the enigmatic warning as the only evidence of that strange encounter. Upon finishing in the library, Jessica headed to Edward's office. The door was ajar, and she could see the Mason patriarch in a heated discussion with a man she didn't recognize. The gestures were tense, the faces contorted in expressions of anger. Edward seemed to be threatening the visitor, who visibly backed away, intimidated. Jessica quickly moved away, her heart racing. That wasn't a scene she should have witnessed. As she headed to the service area, she met Marina, the housekeeper, who was trying to learn sign language to better communicate with her. "Be careful," Marina signed with hesitant movements. "There are dangerous secrets in this house." That night, upon returning to her modest apartment in the fishing village, Jessica couldn't get the day's images out of her head. Luke's warning, the discussion in the office, Marina's alert, and, most intriguingly, the mysterious black horse. While caressing her belly, feeling the baby's movements, she had the strange sensation that the animal wasn't there by chance, and that somehow her fate and that of the Masons were inextricably intertwined. The following morning, Jessica woke up with a strange uneasiness. Her dreams had been disturbed by images of the black horse, its intense eyes fixed on her as if trying to communicate something important. During breakfast, while spreading jam on a piece of toast, She noticed a headline in the local newspaper abandoned by her neighbor at the next table. 3 years since Charles Miller's disappearance, family still seeking answers. The name triggered a vague memory, something she couldn't quite place. Charles Miller, why did that name seem important? Jessica kept the information in mind as she prepared for another day at the Mason mansion. Upon arrival, she noticed unusual movement. Luxury cars were parked at the entrance, and men in suits circulated through the gardens, talking in small groups. Edward Mason was at the center, displaying his characteristic businessman smile. His wife, Helen, an elegant and distant woman, remained by his side like a decorative statue. "Important meeting today," signed Martha upon meeting her. "Stay away from the main." "Oh, Mr. Edward doesn't want interruptions." Jessica nodded and headed to her daily tasks. While cleaning the second-floor rooms, she noticed Luke standing on the balcony, observing the movement below with an expression of displeasure. There was something in his gaze, a mixture of revolt and resignation, that intrigued Jessica. In the hallway, she bumped into Carl, the mansion's security guard, who seemed particularly nervous that day. He muttered something she couldn't understand, but his tense countenance spoke for itself. Jessica noticed he was holding an envelope tightly, his fingers white from pressure. During the employees' lunch, Marina sat beside her and, with discreet gestures, began to converse. "Blue Bay project," she signed with difficulty. "Everyone's talking about it. Edward will make millions, but they say something's wrong." Jessica frowned, questioning with her hands what could be wrong. "Protected area," replied Marina, forming the words slowly so Jessica could understand. "And Charles Miller was investigating before." Marina made a gesture, cutting across her neck, but quickly regretted it, seeing Jessica's horrified expression. No, he disappeared," she corrected herself, gesturing confusedly. After lunch, Jessica was assigned to organize the library again. The spacious room, with its walls covered in books from floor to ceiling, was one of the quietest places in the mansion. While repositioning some volumes, a sudden breeze came through the open window, knocking several papers from a nearby table. As she collected them, Jessica found a photograph that had slipped behind a bookshelf. In it, Edward Mason smiled beside a middle-aged man in front of a sign that read, "Future site of Blue Bay Resort." On the back of the photo, handwritten, it read, "Charles Miller, Blue Bay Project 2019. Jessica's heart raced. The missing man was connected to Edward and the project Marina had mentioned, and the date, 2019. If the man had disappeared 3 years ago, as indicated by the morning's newspaper, this photo was from shortly before the incident. Without thinking twice, Jessica tucked the photograph in her pocket. Something told her that piece of paper was more important than it seemed. In the afternoon, while passing through the corridor leading to Edward's office, she felt a vibration in the floor, raised voices in discussion. The door was ajar, and she could see Edward and Luke in a heated confrontation. "Are you crazy?" Luke gestured, his face contorted with anger. "People are starting to ask questions. We can't continue with this." "Calm down," Edward replied coldly. "Everything is under control. Nobody will discover anything." "And if they do? Have you thought about that? What happened to Charles Miller could happen to any of us." Edward advanced threateningly toward his son, but stopped upon noticing Jessica's shadow in the corridor. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in that look, a silent threat, a warning for her to stay away. Jessica lowered her head and continued on her way, pretending not to have seen anything, but her heart was beating erratically. The photograph in her pocket seemed to burn, and she knew she had crossed a dangerous line. At the end of the day, as she prepared to leave, a movement in the garden caught her attention. The black horse was there again, standing among the trees, watching her. For an instant, Jessica had the impression that the animal nodded, as if approving of her discovery. When she arrived home, she found an envelope under her door. Inside, an anonymous note. "Be careful with the Masons. They are not what they seem. The truth about Charles Miller needs to come to light. Your baby will be the key to all of this." Jessica sank into a chair, her hand trembling as she held the paper. How could her baby be related to all this? Who had sent that message? And most importantly, how dangerous were the secrets she was beginning to uncover? Looking out the window at the night falling over Port Haven, Jessica felt the baby move. In her womb. A certainty grew within her. She could no longer ignore the secrets of the Mason mansion. For herself and for her child, she needed to discover the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. The anonymous letter wouldn't leave Jessica's mind. All night, she turned the words over in her head, trying to decipher the enigma. How could her baby be the key to unraveling the Mason's secrets? Was it just a veiled threat, or was there more behind those words? The next morning, upon arriving, at the mansion, Jessica noticed different looks upon her. Carl, the security guard, watched her with disconcerting intensity. Martha seemed more distant and avoided her gaze. Only Marina remained accessible, though visibly nervous. Edward asked if you found anything in the library yesterday. Marina signed discreetly while they served breakfast to the Mason family. He seemed concerned. Jessica felt a chill down her spine. How did Edward know she had found something? Was it possible there were cameras in the library? She shook her head negatively, trying to maintain a neutral expression. During the meal, she noticed the tension among family members. Helen, always cold and distant, barely touched her food. Luke avoided looking at his father, concentrating on his coffee, as if all the answers of the universe were there. Edward, meanwhile, maintained a facade of normalcy, though his eyes demonstrated constant vigilance. After finishing serving, Jessica withdrew to her daily tasks. In the hallway, she felt someone touch her shoulder. It was Luke, with a pale face and restless eyes. "We need to talk," he wrote on the notepad he always carried to communicate with her. "Meet me at the old barn at 3 in the afternoon. It's important." Jessica hesitated for a moment but ended up nodding. What could Luke want? Was it a trap, or did he really have important information? The old barn was at the back of the property, a worn wooden structure that served more as storage than for its original purpose. Few employees went there, making it a perfect place for private conversations. At 3 o'clock sharp, Jessica headed to the location, her heart racing and all senses on alert. To her surprise, she found not only Luke but also Marina waiting nervously. "We know you found the photo," Marina signed with surprising precision, demonstrating that she had practiced more than she let on. "And we know you received the letter." Jessica took a step back, suspicious. How could they know about the letter? "I placed it under your door," confessed Luke, writing quickly on the notepad. "Marina and I have been trying to gather evidence against my father for months. Charles Miller was my friend, and something happened to him." Marina complimented in sign language. "Luke has been trying to discover the truth, but it's dangerous. Edward has powerful connections." Jessica observed them, still uncertain if she could trust them. Luke noticed her hesitation and wrote again. "I know it's hard to believe, but we're on your side. The Blue Bay project is just the tip of the iceberg. My father is involved in something much bigger." "Why me?" questioned Jessica with firm gestures. "Why involve a pregnant employee in something so dangerous?" Marina and Luke exchanged looks, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, Marina signed slowly. "Your baby is not a coincidence." Before she could elaborate, the sound of footsteps alerted them. Carl, the security guard, was approaching the barn. Marina quickly pushed Jessica behind hay bales, while Luke assumed a casual posture, pretending to check some old equipment. "Mr. Luke," Carl's deep voice echoed through the barn. "Your father is looking for you. There are important visitors at the house." "Tell him I'm coming," replied Luke with forced calmness. When Carl moved away, Marina helped Jessica out of her hiding place. "It's not safe to continue here," she signed quickly. "Find the black horse. He will guide you." "The horse?" Jessica frowned, confused. What does he have to do with all this? Luke wrote hastily, "Not everything is what it seems on this property. The horse only appears at important moments. He is special." Before they could explain more, the distant sound of a car interrupted them again. Luke put the pad in his pocket and signaled for them to separate. Marina squeezed Jessica's hand, placing a small flash drive in it. "Here are some answers," she signed, "but be careful. Lives have been lost for much less." Jessica returned to the main house with her mind buzzing with questions. While cleaning one of the guest rooms, she saw Edward through the window, receiving a group of men in suits, local politicians and businessmen she recognized from the newspapers. Among them was the mayor of Port Haven, smiling and appearing, very familiar with the Mason patriarch. At the end of her shift, Jessica decided to pass by the beach before returning home. The sea always calmed her, and she needed to organize her thoughts. Sitting on the sand, watching the waves breaking, gently on the coast, she took Charles Miller's photograph from her pocket. What might have happened to that man? And why would her baby be important in this story? A movement caught her attention. At the edge of the beach, where rocks formed a small cove, was the black horse. The animal watched her with its deep, intelligent eyes as if waiting for her to follow. Jessica stood up, hesitant. The words of Luke and Marina echoed in her mind. "The horse will guide you." With cautious steps, she began to approach the animal. The horse remained still, just watching. When Jessica was a few meters away, it turned and began to walk toward the rocks, stopping occasionally to verify she was following. It was then that Jessica noticed the horse left no footprints in the wet sand. With her heart racing, she continued following the mysterious animal, which guided her to a small cave among the rocks, a place she had never noticed before, despite frequenting that beach since childhood. At the entrance to the cave, the horse stopped and looked at her intensely, as if inviting her to enter. Jessica hesitated, the instinct of self-preservation fighting against curiosity. Finally, gathering courage, she entered the dark cave, not knowing that step would forever change the course of her life. The sunlight gradually disappeared as Jessica advanced through the narrow cave. Her fingers slid along the damp walls to maintain balance, while her eyes tried to adapt to the growing darkness. The black horse had disappeared, but she felt she wasn't alone in that place. After a few meters, the passage widened, revealing a small natural chamber, illuminated by an opening in the ceiling. The filtered light created an almost mystical environment, highlighting something that made Jessica stop abruptly. On the cave walls were drawings, ancient indigenous symbols mixed with more recent paintings, forming a visual narrative that seemed to tell the story of Port Haven. A movement in the darkest part of the chamber startled her. A figure emerged from the shadows, an elderly man with skin wrinkled by the sun and hair as white as sea foam. He wore simple fisherman's clothes and leaned on a carved walking stick. "Oh, you finally came," he said, momentarily forgetting she couldn't hear him. Jessica pointed to her own ears and shook her head. The old man nodded in understanding and, to her surprise, began to communicate in sign language with fluency. "My name is Jack," he signed. "I am the guardian of the stories of this land. I have been waiting for you, daughter of the sea." Jessica frowned, confused by the reference. The old man smiled gently and continued. "The black horse brought you to me because the time has come for the truth to emerge. The Masons have disturbed the balance of this land, and you carry in your womb the one who can restore it." With precise gestures, Jack invited her to sit on a small mat in the center of the chamber. Jessica obeyed, intrigued and apprehensive at the same time. "Long ago," the old man began to narrate with his hands, "this land was sacred to the people who lived here. The sea, the forests, and the creatures lived in harmony. Then came the colonizers, then the explorers, and now predators like Edward Mason." Jack pointed to one of the paintings on the wall, a figure resembling the black horse. "The guardian always appears when the balance is threatened. He chooses a messenger to reveal the truth. This time, he chose you." "Why me?" questioned Jessica, the confusion evident in her gestures. "Because you see the world differently," replied Jack. "Your silence has allowed you to develop a perception that others do not possess. And because—" he hesitated as if measuring his next words. "The baby you carry has a connection to this land that goes beyond what you can imagine." The old man moved to a small worn wooden chest and removed a yellowed envelope from it. Charles Miller discovered Edward's plans for the Blue Bay project. It wasn't just a luxury resort, but an operation to cover up something much bigger. Jessica accepted the envelope with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were documents detailing how the Blue Bay project would serve as a facade for an illegal operation extracting rare natural resources found in the protected area of the bay. There were also photos of Edward with politicians and businessmen, all receiving large sums of money. Charles discovered all this and confronted Edward, continued Jack. He disappeared the following night. No one knows what happened to him, but a noise at the entrance of the cave interrupted the narrative. Jack quickly put away the documents and indicated a side passage for Jessica. Go. It's not safe for you to stay here. Take this with you. He handed her a small silver medallion with the symbol of the horse engraved on it. This will protect you. Return when the moon is full. Jessica hesitated, reluctant to leave the old man behind. And you? Don't worry about me. I've lived in these caves for decades. I know every passage and hiding place. Go, protect your child. Following Jack's directions, Jessica found a narrow passage that serpentined upward, eventually leading her to a discreet exit among the rocks, hundreds of meters from where she had entered. The sun was already setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. As she hurriedly walked back home, Jessica noticed unusual movement near the mansion. Several police cars were parked at the entrance, and lights flashed in the growing darkness. Keeping to the shadows, she approached close enough to see Edward tensely conversing with the local sheriff, while Helen cried, supported by Luke. An ambulance was parked nearby, and paramedics were carrying a stretcher with a covered body. Jessica felt a chill. What had happened? Who was on that stretcher? Moving discreetly among bushes, she managed to approach a group of employees, observing the scene from a distance. Marina was among them, her face pale and hands visibly trembling. When their gazes crossed, Marina made a subtle gesture indicating they would meet later. Jessica continued her way home, her mind full of questions and her heart heavy with the weight of the day's revelations. The medallion Jack had given her seemed warm against her skin, as if possessing a life of its own. Upon reaching her small apartment, she found the door ajar. Someone had been there. Cautiously she entered, checking each room. Nothing seemed to have been taken, but her belongings had clearly been searched. A message had been left on her mirror, written with red lipstick. We know what you found. Don't trust anyone. Jessica sank into a chair, fear finally dominating her. Instinctively, her hands protected her belly. Who had invaded her home? Edward and his accomplices? Or was it someone trying to warn her? A soft knock on the door startled her. Hesitantly, she approached and looked through the peephole. It was Marina, alone and visibly agitated. Jessica opened the door, quickly pulling the housekeeper inside. Martha was found dead in Edward's office, signed Marina, her hands trembling. They're saying it was an accident, but she was examining documents related to the Blue Bay project. Luke thinks Edward is eliminating witnesses. Jessica felt her blood freeze. Martha, the kind housekeeper who tried to communicate with her in sign language, was now dead. And she herself could be next, especially if Edward discovered she had found Charles Miller, or rather the mysterious Jack, and obtained evidence against him. We need to leave here now, Marina signed with urgency, helping Jessica gather some essential belongings. Edward sent Carl to search your apartment. They think you have the documents that Martha found. Jessica nodded, trying to stay calm while packing clothes and personal items into a small backpack. Her fingers touched the medallion Jack had given her, feeling its engraved surface as if seeking some kind of security in it. Where are we going? Jessica asked in sign language. Luke has a secluded cottage on the northern part of the beach, replied Marina. No one knows about it, not even Edward. We'll be safe there for now. As they finished preparing, a persistent doubt consumed Jessica. Why did Edward consider her such a great threat? Why had Jack said her baby was important? What did it mean to be the daughter of the sea? As if reading her thoughts, Marina hesitated before signing. There's something you need to know about your baby, but I'm not the right person to tell you. Luke will explain everything when we get to the cottage. Luke's cottage was in an isolated area, surrounded by dense vegetation, with a view of a small private cove. A narrow and almost invisible path was the only access, making it the perfect hideout. When they arrived, they found Luke anxiously waiting on the porch. "Thank God you made it," he wrote on his notepad. "The police have started asking questions about what happened to Martha, but my father is already working to cover up the case." Inside the cottage, the atmosphere was tense. Luke seemed nervous, pacing back and forth, while Marina prepared tea to calm their nerves. Jessica observed them both, feeling there was much more to this story than they were revealing. "It's time to tell her the truth," Marina signed to Luke. He nodded gravely and sat down before Jessica. "What I'm going to tell you will seem impossible," he wrote, "but it's the truth my father has tried to hide for years." Luke began his narrative, writing that the Mason family had arrived in Port Haven 4 generations ago, when his great-grandfather discovered the region and realized its economic potential. What started as a small property quickly expanded as the Masons acquired lands, often through questionable means. "My great-grandfather discovered something in this land," continued Luke, "something that went beyond material wealth. Local legend spoke of a sacred place where the earth's energy concentrated, a point of power that the indigenous people of the region had protected for centuries." As he advanced in his explanation, Luke revealed that each generation of the Masons had sought to control this energy, using it to increase their influence and power. Edward had discovered that the convergence point of this energy was exactly in the area he planned to develop with the Maid Blue Bay project. "But there is a prophecy," wrote Luke, pausing to ensure that Jessica was following. "A child born to someone connected to the sea who cannot hear its words but feels its soul. This child would be able to restore balance and protect the sacred power of the land." Jessica placed her hands on her belly, understanding beginning to form on her face. Luke nodded. "My father discovered the prophecy when you started working at the mansion. When he learned you were pregnant, he began investigating your past." Marina approached, signing slowly. "Your mother was known as the daughter of the sea. She swam in the deepest waters without fear, talked with fishermen about the secrets of the tides. People said she had been blessed by the sea." A distant memory emerged in Jessica's mind. Her mother, long black hair floating in the sea breeze, teaching her to respect the ocean, to feel its rhythms even in the silence of her world. She had lost her mother while still young, but these memories remained vivid. "Edward fears your baby," continued Luke on his notepad. "He knows that if the prophecy is fulfilled, all the power he has built will crumble. The Blue Bay project isn't just a resort. It's an attempt to channel the sacred energy for his own purposes." Jessica felt the baby move in her womb, as if responding to the revelations. The medallion Jack had given her seemed warmer against her skin. "Charles Miller discovered all of this," signed Marina, taking Luke's place in the narrative. "He was an environmentalist who initially was only investigating the resort's impacts on the protected area, but the more he dug, the more he discovered about Edward's true plans." Luke resumed writing, "Charles was my friend. When he told me what he had discovered, I began questioning everything my father had built. We tried to gather enough evidence to stop him, but..." Marina completed. "Charles disappeared. We believe he went into hiding and assumed the identity of Jack to continue his mission. Few know about this connection." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in Jessica's mind. The mystery of the Black Horse, Jack's enigmatic words, Edward's obsession with the Blue Bay project. It all made sense now. A noise coming from the forest interrupted the conversation. The three froze, alert to any movement. Luke turned off the lights and cautiously approached the window. "There's someone out there," he wrote quickly. Marina grabbed a flashlight and signed, "I'll check. Stay here." Before they could stop her, Marina slipped out of the cottage, moving silently among the shadows. Tense minutes passed until a flash of light cut through the darkness, followed by Marina's silhouette running back to the cottage. "It's Carl, the security guard," she signed desperately as she entered. "He's with 2 more men. They must have followed us." Luke grabbed Jessica's hands, his eyes conveying the panic he felt. He quickly wrote, "There's a passage at the back of the cottage that leads to the beach. You need to go. I'll distract them." "And you?" questioned Jessica, reluctant to leave him behind. "I'm a Mason," he wrote with a sad smile. "They'll hesitate to hurt me. You need to protect your baby, the hope for all of us." As footsteps approached the cottage entrance, Marina pulled Jessica to the back, revealing a passage hidden by a bookshelf. The last glimpse Jessica had of Luke was of him facing the door, ready to confront his father's men and buy time for their escape. The secret passage was narrow and damp, illuminated only by the weak light of Marina's flashlight. Jessica followed, close behind, one hand on the rocky wall and the other protectively over her belly. The tunnel seemed to have been excavated long ago, with roots and natural formations, creating a winding path that descended toward the beach. "Luke built this passage years ago," signed Marina when they stopped to catch their breath. "He always suspected his father and wanted to have an escape route if needed." Muffled voices and the sound of things being broken echoed distantly behind them. Jessica felt a tightness in her chest, worried about what might be happening to Luke. "He'll be fine," signed Marina, noticing her expression. "Luke is smart and knows how to handle Carl. Come on, we need to continue." After what seemed like an eternity, the tunnel began to widen, and the smell of sea salt grew stronger. Finally, they emerged in a small, natural cave that opened onto an isolated cove. The full moon illuminated the calm waters, creating a silver path over the sea. "We need to reach Jack," signed Marina, pointing to the other side of the bay. "He'll help us hide you until we figure out how to stop Edward." A movement in the water caught Jessica's attention. It was the black horse, but this time it seemed different. Its coat shone as if covered with stars, and its eyes emanated a supernatural blue light. The animal remained at the water's edge, as if inviting them to follow it. "The Guardian," whispered Marina, her fingers forming the name with reverence. "He's showing us the way." Jessica hesitated, fear and doubt fighting against the need to trust something that defied logic. The medallion around her neck pulsed with a comforting warmth, as if responding to the presence of the mystical horse. "We have no choice," signed Marina, making the decision for them. "Let's follow along the shoreline. It's safer than trying the roads where Carl could intercept us." As they walked on the soft sand, keeping to the shadows of the coastal rocks, Jessica couldn't help thinking about everything she had discovered in the last few hours. Her baby, a child not yet born, was at the center of a prophecy that threatened the empire built by Edward Mason. It was something so fantastic, it seemed out of a novel, but the danger she faced was too real to ignore. The black horse stayed ahead of them, sometimes disappearing among the rocks only to reappear meters ahead, guiding them through a path that seemed to materialize as they advanced. After about an hour of careful walking, Marina signaled for them to stop. "We need to rest a bit. Are you okay?" Jessica nodded, though exhaustion was beginning to weigh on her body. The pregnancy made the journey even more challenging, but adrenaline and protective instinct kept her moving. They found shelter in a small rocky formation, partially hidden by dense vegetation. Marina took a water bottle and some hastily prepared sandwiches from her backpack. "Luke and I have been investigating Edward for months," explained Marina as they ate. "We began to suspect when we noticed changes in his behavior after the Blue Bay project was approved. He became more reserved, more aggressive, and began having secret meetings with powerful people in the region." Jessica watched Marina's signs attentively, absorbing every detail of the story. According to Marina, Edward had discovered ancient documents on the property that mentioned the mystical power concentrated in the Bay region. Obsessively, he began researching local legends and prophecies, eventually finding the one that mentioned the child of silence born of the daughter of the sea. "When you came to work at the mansion, pregnant and deaf, daughter of a woman known for her connection with the ocean, Edward realized the coincidence," continued Marina. "He began watching you, planning—" A distant noise interrupted the explanation. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness about half a mile away, moving along the beach. Carl and his men had found the secret passage and were now following their trail. "We need to go," Marina signed urgently, gathering their belongings. "They're getting closer." Jessica rose quickly, feeling a twinge in her belly that made her bend slightly. Marina noticed her discomfort and looked at her with concern. "I'm fine," signed Jessica, breathing deeply to control the momentary pain. "We can continue." The black horse reappeared, this time closer. Its penetrating gaze seemed to communicate something directly to Jessica, a silent message that only she could understand. Instinctively, she touched the medallion on her neck, feeling it vibrate under her fingers. "He wants us to follow him to the water," signed Jessica, surprising herself with this certainty. Marina hesitated, looking from the approaching lights to the dark sea. "Are you sure? It's dangerous in your condition." Jessica nodded firmly. Something inside her trusted the mysterious horse, a connection that went beyond logic or rational explanation. It was as if a forgotten part of her being recognized that creature as an ancestral protector. Following the animal, they approached the water's edge. To their surprise, a small wooden boat emerged among the waves. Guided by a man, Jessica immediately recognized Jack, the guardian of the land's stories. "Quick," signed the old man, gesturing for them to enter the boat. "They're coming." Marina helped Jessica climb into the vessel, which swayed gently with the waves. As soon as they settled in, Jack began rowing skillfully, moving them away from the coast with surprising strength for someone his age. Looking back, Jessica saw the flashlights reach the beach where they had been hidden moments before. Carl and his men seemed confused, the lights moving erratically as they searched for any sign of their whereabouts. The black horse remained on the beach for a moment, watching them. Then, in a fluid movement that defied nature, the animal walked over the waters, its hooves barely touching the surface, before disappearing into a silver mist. "The Guardian has done its part," signed Jack, noticing Jessica's astonished look. "Now we need to do ours." As they moved away from the coast, navigating under the silent gaze of the moon, Jessica felt a strange peace envelop her, as if she was finally on the right path. Her baby moved in, her womb as if in agreement. "Where are we going?" she asked Jack. "To the heart of the bay," replied the old man. "To the place where everything began and where everything can end. The place where the truth about Edward Mason and the Blue Bay project will finally be revealed." Marina looked back one last time, concern evident in her eyes. "And Luke? What will happen to him?" "The son of the Predator has his own path to follow," signed Jack enigmatically. "If he is truly different from his father, he will find a way to help us when we need it most." The boat continued gliding silently across the bay, taking them away from immediate danger, but toward a confrontation that would define not only the fate of Jessica and her baby, but the future of all of Port Haven. The boat glided silently across the bay, guided by Jack's experienced hands. The full moon created a silver path over the dark waters, illuminating the distant outline of a small island that Jessica had never noticed before, despite having spent her entire life in Port Haven. "The Island of the Guardians," signed Jack, noticing her curious gaze. "It only reveals itself to those who need to find it." Marina nervously observed the horizon, looking for signs of pursuit. "How will Carl not see it too? He's hunting us." "The Guardian protects those who protect the land," replied the old man, with serenity. "The island will remain invisible to those who serve greed and destruction." As they approached, Jessica began to distinguish the outlines of a small fishing village on the island's coast. Simple huts built with natural materials harmonized with the lush vegetation, as if they were part of the land itself. Small lights twinkled among the trees, revealing signs of life and activity. When the boat docked at a small wooden pier, several people approached to greet them. To Jessica's surprise, many of them communicated in sign language, their agile fingers forming words of welcome. "Welcome to our community," signed an elderly woman with gray hair and sun-marked skin. "I am Teresa, guardian of the island's memories." Jack explained that the island community was composed of people who had chosen to live in harmony with nature, away from the greed and destruction of the modern world. Many were descendants of the original peoples who inhabited the region before colonization, and others, he added with an enigmatic smile, are those whom the world believes to have disappeared. As if responding to this cue, a middle-aged man emerged from one of the huts. Jessica felt her heart race as she recognized him from the photograph, Charles Miller, the supposedly missing environmentalist. "Welcome, Jessica," he signed, with surprising fluency. "I'm sorry for all the mystery, but it was necessary to protect you and your baby." "You're alive," Marina exclaimed in signs, expressing the shock they both felt. "Luke will be so relieved." A shadow of concern crossed Charles's face. "Edward believes I was close to exposing his plans when I disappeared. In truth, I discovered something much deeper that forced me to fake my own departure and seek refuge here." Teresa led the group to the largest of the huts, where a simple meal awaited them. Jessica realized she was hungry, the stress and escape having consumed her energy. As they ate, Charles began to explain how he had discovered the truth about the Blue Bay project. "I started by investigating just the environmental impacts," he signed. "But the more I researched, the more I realized that Edward wasn't just interested in building a resort. He had found ancient documents about a mystical power concentrated in the bay, something that the original peoples had protected for centuries." Teresa complimented the explanation. "Our island is the center of that power. It's a place where the energies of land, sea, and sky meet. The ancients called it the Mother's Heart. For generations, guardians were chosen to protect this balance. And now my baby is part of this story," signed Jessica, still trying to fully comprehend her role in all of this. Charles nodded gravely. "The prophecy speaks of a child born in silence, daughter of the woman of the sea. A child who will bring balance back when the predator threatens to destroy the heart of the land. Your mother, Martha, was known as the Woman of the Sea," explained Teresa, surprising Jessica with the knowledge about her family. "She swam farther than any fisherman, talked to marine creatures. Many believed she was blessed by the sea spirits." A distant memory emerged in Jessica's mind, her mother diving into deep waters without fear, emerging with a radiant smile, as if she had visited another world. She always told stories about marine beings and water spirits to Jessica, stories that most considered merely fertile imagination. "But how did Edward discover the prophecy?" questioned Marina, bringing Jessica back to the present. "Accidentally," replied Charles. "During the initial excavations for the Blue Bay project, they found ancient artifacts, including a stone with inscriptions that mentioned the prophecy. Edward hired specialists to translate it in secret, and when he understood its meaning, he began looking for signs. When you arrived at the mansion, pregnant and deaf, daughter of Martha of the Sea, he perceived the connection," continued Jack. "Your hiring was no accident. Edward wanted to keep you close, observe you, and eventually—" He hesitated. "Eventually what?" pressed Jessica, a shiver running down her spine. "Edward's plan was to keep you at the mansion until the child's birth," explained Teresa gently. "Then he would find a way to separate you and raise your child as a Mason, using his power for his own purposes." The horror of this revelation left Jessica speechless for a moment. The idea of Edward planning to separate her from her child was almost unbearable. "But what exactly does Edward hope to achieve with the Blue Bay project?" signed Marina, expressing the doubt that hung over everyone. Charles stood up and unrolled a map on the table. It was a detailed layout of the planned resort, with annotations and markings made by hand. "The resort is just a facade," he explained. "The real objective is to build a specific structure, apparently the convention center, exactly over the bay's power point. This structure was designed to channel and control the mystical energy of the location." Teresa signed with a grave expression. "If he succeeds, the natural balance will be broken. Not only will the bay's ecosystem be destroyed, but the very essence of the place will change forever." "And how can we stop him?" asked Jessica, determination growing within her as she understood the gravity of the situation. Charles smiled, for the first time since they began the conversation. "We already have a plan. Luke has been gathering evidence about irregularities in the environmental licensing of the project. We have documents proving that Edward bribed authorities and falsified impact studies. But we need you, Jessica," added Jack. "Or more precisely, we need the medallion I gave you." Jessica touched the object on her neck, feeling its pulsating energy. "What does it do?" "It's the key to a safe hidden on the Mason property," explained the old man, "a safe that contains the original prophecy document and evidence of Edward's illegal activities over the years. With that evidence, we can expose him publicly and prevent the project from continuing." "But how will I enter the mansion?" questioned Jessica. "Edward must be looking for me everywhere." A vibration in her bag interrupted the conversation. It was Marina's cell phone with a message from Luke. "Father left for Boston. Emergency meeting with investors. Returns tomorrow night. House safe. For now. Where are you?" Their gazes met around the table. Edward's temporary absence created an opportunity they couldn't waste. "This is our chance," signed Charles, determination in his gestures. "Tomorrow, you return to the mansion to recover the documents while I prepare Edward's public exposure." That night, while everyone slept, Jessica left the hut and walked to the beach. The full moon bathed the bay waters with its silver light, creating an almost mystical scenery. Sitting on the sand, her hands protectively over her belly, she contemplated the magnitude of what she was about to face. The black horse appeared again, emerging from the waters like a being made of shadows and light. Its eyes met Jessica's, transmitting a silent message of strength and courage. The animal approached, gently touching the medallion she carried with its muzzle. In that moment, Jessica understood that her destiny and that of her child were intrinsically linked to the land and waters of Port Haven. For generations, guardians had protected the sacred balance of the region. Now it was her turn to be part of this ancestral history, facing Edward Mason's greed, not only for herself or her baby, but for all who called this place home. The morning dawned with a sky heavy with grey clouds, as if nature itself sensed the confrontation to come. Jack navigated the boat back to the mainland with Marina and Jessica aboard, while Charles remained on the island to coordinate the public exposure of Edward, should they succeed in recovering the necessary documents. "Remember," signed Jack, before they parted ways on a secluded beach, "the safe is hidden behind the largest painting in the main office. The medallion is the only key." Marina nodded, translating for Jessica, who watched the movements of the old man's lips attentively. "And if we encounter Carl, the security guard?" "Luke promised to keep him occupied in another part of the property," replied Jack. "You'll have about 2 hours to enter, find the documents and leave." As they walked along the trail leading from the beach to the main road, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Several times she stopped, looking around, only to find the forest silent and apparently empty. "Is everything okay?" signed Marina, noticing her uneasiness. Jessica hesitated before responding. "I feel like something or someone is following us." Marina carefully observed their surroundings but saw nothing suspicious. "Perhaps it's just nervousness. We're about to enter the house of the man who wants to take your baby." The plan was simple in theory. They would enter the mansion as if returning normally to work, taking advantage of Edward's absence. Luke would meet them in the back garden and secretly lead them to the main office. Then they would leave in the same discreet manner, taking with them the evidence that could bring down Edward and stop the Blue Bay project. Upon reaching the mansion gates, they were greeted by a visibly tense but determined Luke. "Carl and his men are inspecting the north grounds," he quickly wrote on his notepad. "We don't have much time." With quick but cautious steps, they crossed the impeccable gardens of the property, keeping to the shadows of the ornamental trees. The mansion seemed strangely silent, as if holding its breath. "Helen left for the spa," wrote Luke, answering Jessica's unasked question. Most of the staff were given the day off. Entering through the back door, Luke guided them through secondary corridors, avoiding the busier areas of the house. Finally, they reached the corridor leading to Edward's main office. "I'll stand guard here," signed Marina, strategically positioning herself to see both sides of the corridor. "Be quick." The office was exactly as Jessica remembered, imposing, with solid wood furniture and shelves filled with books that were rarely touched. The difference was that she now saw it with different eyes, aware of the dark secrets those elegant walls concealed. Luke locked the door behind them and pointed to the largest painting on the wall behind the desk, an oil painting of Port Haven Bay, portrayed in a dramatic sunset. Carefully they removed the heavy painting, revealing a safe embedded in the wall. Jessica took the medallion from her neck, feeling its weight and warmth in the palm of her hand. Following her instinct, she fitted it into a small depression in the center of the safe, perfectly molded for the object. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft click was followed by the movement of the safe door, which slowly opened. Inside was an ancient wooden box and a modern leather folder. Luke took both, placing them on his father's desk. The box contained a yellowed parchment with inscriptions in an ancient language, drawings of constellations, and a symbol identical to that on the medallion. It was the original prophecy document. The folder, in turn, was filled with contracts, receipts of payments to public officials, and manipulated environmental studies. "Here's everything," Luke hastily wrote. "Enough evidence to bring down my father and stop the Blue Bay project." As they photographed the documents with their cell phones, a sudden movement from Marina at the office door alerted them. She was frantically gesturing. Someone was approaching. Quickly, Luke stored the documents in his backpack, while Jessica replaced the painting on the wall. There was no time to properly close the safe. The doorknob turned and Jessica felt her heart stop for an instant. Marina was trying to explain something from the other side, her voice muffled by the solid wood. Luke unlocked the door, revealing Marina being firmly held by Carl, the security guard, who pushed her into the office. "I thought you might be here," he said with a cold smile, before making way for the figure no one expected to see, Edward Mason. "Son," Edward pronounced with terrifying calmness, his eyes fixed on Luke, "you disappoint me deeply." Luke positioned himself protectively in front of Jessica and Marina. "It's over, Dad. We have all the evidence. If anything happens to us, Charles, Miller will make it public." A flash of surprise crossed Edward's face. "Charles Miller is alive? Interesting." He circled the room slowly, like a predator evaluating its prey. "But that changes nothing. The Blue Bay project will proceed as planned." "Why?" questioned Luke, simultaneously translating for Jessica in sign language. "Why destroy a place that should be protected? Why risk everything for power?" Edward stopped in front of the painting, noticing subtle signs that it had been moved. "You don't understand the potential of what I've discovered. The power concentrated in the bay could transform not just Port Haven, but the balance of power across the entire country. Whoever controls it will have influence beyond imagination." As Edward spoke, distracted by his own ambition, Jessica noticed a movement through the window. The black horse was in the garden, its eyes fixed on her. The medallion on her chest pulsed with renewed energy, almost as if it were alive. Without anyone noticing, she began to move discreetly toward the window. Marina, noticing her intention, created a distraction, deliberately knocking over a porcelain vase. "Careful!" exclaimed Carl, turning toward the noise. In that decisive moment, Jessica opened the window and the black horse advanced, not toward the office, but toward the sky, transforming into a dark mist that quickly covered the mansion. Thunder echoed and the ground shook beneath their feet. Edward staggered, grabbing the desk to maintain balance. "What's happening?" Luke took advantage of the distraction to push Carl, who lost his balance and fell. Marina grabbed the backpack with the documents and ran to the door, followed by Jessica. "Stop them!" shouted Edward. But it was too late. The three ran through the mansion corridors, which now seemed alive, trembling and creaking as if awakening from a long sleep. Paintings fell from walls, chandeliers swayed dangerously, and the remaining staff ran in panic. Upon reaching the gardens, they found Helen Mason standing in the midst of the chaos, observing the sky with an expression of admiration. "Helen!" called Luke, ready to run past her. To everyone's surprise, she turned and smiled. "Go," she said simply. "Do what needs to be done. This land deserves to be protected." Without time to process this unexpected ally, they ran toward the gates, where a car awaited them, driven by none other than Jack. "Get in," he urgently signaled. "The Guardian has awakened the land. It's responding to the threat." As they sped along the winding road leading to town, Jessica looked back. The Mason mansion seemed to shrink in the distance, while the supernatural storm concentrated specifically over it, as if nature itself were exercising its judgment. In the weeks that followed, the story of Edward Mason and the Blue Bay Project dominated national headlines. The documents recovered by Luke revealed a corruption scheme that went far beyond the resort. Politicians resigned, businessmen were arrested, and the project was permanently cancelled. Edward Mason disappeared on the night of the storm. Some say he fled to avoid prison. Others, more connected to Port Haven's ancient legends, whisper that the land reclaimed what was its own. Helen, surprisingly, became a fervent advocate for the bay's preservation, donating a large part of the family fortune to conservation projects. 3 months later, in a small seaside house that had belonged to her mother, Jessica gave birth to a healthy baby girl under the full moon's light. Marina, Luke, and Charles were present, forming an unlikely family united by fate and the struggle to protect something greater than themselves. As Jessica cradled her daughter in her arms, watching the sea through the window, she saw the black horse one last time, standing on the beach beneath the moonlight. The animal bowed its head as if in reverence before dissolving into the night breeze. The medallion, now hanging over the child's crib, glowed softly in the dimness. The prophecy had been fulfilled in ways no one could have predicted. Balance had been restored, and Jessica's daughter would grow up knowing both silence and the secret language of the land and sea that her ancestors had protected for generations. In Port Haven, the irregular cobblestone streets continued witnessing the ebb and flow of the tides as new guardians took their place in the long history of that magical land, no longer invisible but strengthened by union and the knowledge that some connections transcend words, being felt in the deepest silence of the soul.